The day started like any other, but it ended with a shock that made my world tilt. I was in Fort Hood, Texas, and the news hit us like a punch in the gut. My mom, Gladys, was gone. Just like that, the words echoed in my head. She's gone. I couldn't breathe. The world around me blurred, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of silence. The Colonel, Tom Parker, was there, trying to keep everything together. He was like a second father to me, and in that moment I clung to him. The Colonel made all the arrangements, but I was lost. Everything I have is gone. I kept repeating, and it wasn't just about my mom. It was about my music, my career, my life. I felt like I was losing everything. A few months earlier, in June, I had a recording session in Nashville. It was supposed to be a quick one, but it turned out to be something more. Steve Scholes, my producer at RCA, was pushing for more sessions before I shipped out to Germany. The Colonel was reluctant, but he finally agreed to a recording and a photo session during my 2-week furlough. We ended up at RCA New Studio B in Nashville. Chet Atkins, the man behind the scenes, put together a top-notch band. They called it the A Team, and they were the best in the business. There was Hank Sugarfoot Garland on guitar, Bob Moore on bass, Murray Buddy Harmon on drums, and DJ Fontana, who had been with me from the beginning. Floyd Kramer played the piano, and the Jordanaires were there too. The atmosphere was different from my earlier sessions. It was more professional, and Steve was pushing us to get as much done as possible. We started with I Need Your Love Tonight. The song was up-tempo, and I had fun with it. I played around with the lyrics, using all the sexy phrasings I could think of. The Jordanaires were there, and Ray Walker, the new bass singer, was a standout. I loved his voice and asked him to double several lines, making sure he used the same microphone as me so I could control the blend of our voices. Next up was A Big Hunk O' Love. This one was steamier with lines like, I ain't greedy baby, all I want is all you've got. It was bluesy and energetic, and the band went all out. I was totally absorbed, singing and humming along with the solos. By the time we got to take 18, we had something special. Ain't That Loving You Baby was a bit trickier. It was written by Clyde Otis and Ivory Joe Hunter specifically for the session, but it didn't come as naturally as the others. We struggled with the arrangement, and the Jordanaires sounded a bit lost at first. Chet Atkins stepped in and suggested a walking bass figure to help stabilize the rhythm. It took us a while, but we finally got it on take 11. And Now and Then There's a Fool Such as I was a familiar song, and it had a special place in the Colonel's heart. It was a hit for Hank Snowback in 1953, and the Colonel made a rare pitch to get the publishing rights. Chet's rhythm guitar gave it a unique flavor, and I adjusted the echo to get the right sound. I Got Stung was the last song of the session. It was a tough one, but we kept at it. Hank Garland's guitar solos were incredible, and the Jordanaires found their place. By take 24, we had it. When the session ended, it was early morning. I walked out of the studio, feeling a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. I had done everything I could, and now it was up to the Colonel and Steve to make sure I had a career to return to. But then, on September 22nd, 1958, I boarded the USS, Randall in Brooklyn heading to Germany. The Colonel's role shifted. He was now a manager without an artist, but he had a plan. He knew the importance of keeping my name in the public eye, especially after my mom's passing. He started working on turning my Army service into an advantage. He saw it as a chance to reinvent me, to make me a full-time movie star. The Colonel negotiated better deals for my movies, and he was determined to set the stage for the new career I would begin when I returned home. He wanted to show the world that I wasn't just a rebellious teen idol, but a responsible, patriotic young man. It was a lot of selling, but he was good at it. Meanwhile, Steve and the Colonel kept bickering over the release schedule. Steve wanted to keep the flow of singles and albums going, but the Colonel was cautious. With only a handful of songs from the June session and a few unreleased tracks, Steve had to work with what he had. The fall of 1958 saw strong sales, but there were signs that things were changing. The days of multi-million seller hits seemed to be over, and the album sales were slower than before. I was in Germany, and the world was moving on. But I knew that when I returned, I would have a new beginning. The Colonel had a plan, and I had a dream. I just had to hold on until I could make it all come true. I remember those days like it was yesterday. The Colonel and Scholes were still pushing for One Night, even though I didn't really want to do it. The publishing company had a deal for the royalties, but it had to be out by October 31st, 1958. The Colonel thought it would be a waste not to take the deal, and he finally convinced me. I Got Stung from the June session was the B-side. The new single was a hit right away. DJ loved the A-side, but both songs climbed the charts quickly, reaching number 4 and number 8. I think the split airplay might have stopped One Night from reaching number 1, but the single sold way more copies than the last two releases. To keep my fans happy and generate more income, the Colonel convinced Scholes to put out a recording of my pre-embarkation press conference. It was called Elvis Sales, and even without any new music, it sold 100,000 EP. For Christmas, there was talk of releasing Santa Claus Is Back in Town, but since it was already on an EP and LP, they decided to release a sequel EP with 4 other Christmas songs instead. When I was in Germany, the Colonel and Scholes started arguing more. Scholes wanted to use the June recordings for new singles, but the Colonel thought they were too noisy. He even tried to play me against Scholes, but I had already told Scholes I wasn't happy with the take. In March 1959, RCA released A Fool Such as I, with I Need Your Love Tonight. Both songs did great, reaching number 2 and number 4, and the single sold 1 million copies. The Colonel's assistant's judgment had won this time. When A Big Hunk O' Love and My Wish Came True came out in July, the Colonel was wrong again. My Wish Came True only reached number 12, while A Big Hunk O' Love, the noisiest of the Nashville recordings, hit the top of the charts. The Colonel didn't worry too much about the past. He was always looking ahead. He repackaged my older singles into a series of EP called A Touch of Gold, and put together 3 new albums. It was a good way to keep making money while I was in the Army. There were moments when I felt homesick and worried. I called the Colonel from Germany, and sometimes he thought about getting me an early discharge. But most of the time, he just worked hard to keep things going. He signed a deal with ABC TV for me to appear on Frank Sinatra's Timex show when I got back from the Army. He even thought about getting me to record an EP in Germany, and encouraged me to get some good home recording equipment. I made some rough home recordings with my friends Red West and Charlie Hodge, and we played around with old and new songs. It was a fun way to pass the time and explore new music. Freddie Bienstock came to visit me in Germany and brought demos for new songs. He went back with a list of songs I was interested in recording when I got back. As the spring of 1960 approached, the Colonel was ready to set his plans in motion. The movie and TV show arrangements were all set, and he had chosen the songs for my first post-Army single. In April 1959, I made some home recordings in Germany. I played the guitar and sang songs like I'm Beginning to Forget You, Mona Lisa, and Danny Boy. Some of these recordings were later included in collections like Elvis, A Legendary Performer Vol. 4, and Platinum, A Life in Music. I also recorded some songs on the piano, like I Asked the Lord and Earth Angel. These home recordings were a window into my musical thinking during that time. On March 3, 1960, I finally came back to the United States. Steve Scholes wrote in his column that I looked thinner but good, and I was excited to record again. The Frank Sinatra TV special was coming up, and I had to start filming GA Blues soon. So the first RCA recording session was scheduled in Nashville. The last session there had been great, and the Colonel and Steve Scholes wanted to keep the same sound. The band was a bit of a question. Bill Black didn't want to come back, but Scotty and Jay were eager to join me again. Loyalty meant a lot to me, so I decided to keep Scotty and Jay as regular members of my studio band for the next 8 years. We also brought in some great session musicians, like Boots Randolph on sax. The Colonel, Tom Diskin, Bill Bullock, and Steve Scholes were all there when we started recording. Bill Porter set up the 3-track machine, which gave us more space for each player and allowed for real stereo records. We warmed up by singing some gospel songs, and everyone was a bit tense. It had been 2 years since anyone had heard me sing. Did I still have it? Would it still work for them? We started with Make Me Know It by Otis Blackwell. It was a fast, wordy song, but we got it right by take 19. The 3-track recording captured the music clearly and vividly. Next we recorded Soldier Boy, and then the single Stuck on You with Fame and Fortune on the B-side. We also did A Mess of Blues and It Feels So Right. The session was long, but it was a great start to my post-Army career. The room was thick with tension when we started the recording session. Colonel Parker, our CAVP Bill Bullock, and Steve Scholes were all there, practically breathing down my neck. When I sang the first tune, they didn't say much, but once I got into it, they started chatting about other things. I think they were just trying to act cool, but it made me nervous. Then we hit Make Me Know It, and the room relaxed. Everyone could see I was back in form. I'd spent a lot of time in Germany practicing the Four Fellows hit, Soldier Boy, and had talked to Freddie Bienstock about recording it. He'd even made a deal with the publishers. When we got to the studio, Chet Atkins had to remind me not to pop my B.S. into the microphone on the word boy. But by the 14th take, we had a solid version. 2 years in the Army had matured my singing, and it showed. We still needed a single to cut. So after a midnight break, we went back to work on Stuck on You. RCA had already printed generic sleeves for the new 45, with 2 pre-Army photos and a hole in the center, so buyers could read the label. The cover read, Elvis Is new recording for his 50 million fans all over the world. They wanted to be ready, just in case I decided to change the song at the last minute. They planned to rush the master tape to the pressing plant, with 1.4 million units due to ship directly to dealers without waiting for orders. Stuck on You was chosen because it sounded like an Elvis hit. RCA wanted to reach my hardcore fans, who were a bit older now and ready to see me as more mature but still a rocker. They wanted something closer to Don't Be Cruel or Teddy Bear, rather than the raunchier Jailhouse Rock or Hound Dog. The RCA press materials described it as a clever, catchy rhythm piece with exactly the kind of mild rock beat that today's kids like. I didn't really like the song myself, but I put in a solid performance and wrapped it up in 3 takes. Next we worked on Fame and Fortune, a ballad by Ben Weissman. I'd always had mixed feelings about ballad singing, but I gave it my all. The last 2 songs of the night, A Mess of Blues and It Feels So Right, were more my style, gritty and bluesy. The band and I were in perfect sync, and I felt right at home. We recorded 6 cuts in one night, the most productive session I'd ever had. The new technology made it sound better than ever. After the session, we headed to Florida for the next big thing in the Colonel's plan, the Frank Sinatra Timex show at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. We arrived early on March 22nd and started rehearsing. I was dressed in a tuxedo, with my hair styled high. I felt different from everyone else on the show, but I didn't show any nerves. During the duet with Frank Sinatra, where I sang Witchcraft and he sang Love Me Tender, I kept my cool. I performed Stuck on You and Fame and Fortune, and despite any misgivings, I delivered a strong performance. The show was a huge success, drawing 65% of the viewing audience. The Colonel had negotiated a fee of $125,000 for me, and it was worth it. As soon as we got back to Memphis, another Nashville session was scheduled to finish the album. We arrived in Nashville on April 3rd, and the studio was ready. Steve Scholes and Chet Atkins were there, along with Bill Porter, our engineer. The band included Scotty Moore, Hank Garland, Floyd Kramer, and DJ Fontana. We started with Fever, a song I love. It was a 1956 hit for Little Willie John, and I followed Peggy Lee's arrangement. We did it with just Bob Moore's acoustic bass and Buddy Harmon's congas. I felt confident and in control, and it turned out great. Next we did Like a Baby, a Jesse Stone song. It took 6 takes, but it was familiar and we nailed it. Freddie Bienstock had been disappointed when I passed on new songs he'd worked hard on, but now with songs like Fever and Like a Baby, we were building the session around my own record collection. The band and I had a similar musical background, and they followed me into a convincing R&B performance. Then we moved on to It's Now or Never, the new English version of O Sole Mio that Freddie had commissioned. I'd always been drawn to the song, and my mother had a 78 of Caruso's version. Aaron Schroeder, the lyricist, was in the studio, and after the first playback, I told him I wasn't sure I could do the song justice. I went back into the studio and laid down a master in 4 takes. It was pure pop, delivered with musical command and professionalism, exactly what the Colonel wanted. We took a quick break for Crystal Burgers and then got back to work on The Girl of My Best Friend. It took 10 takes, but we got a potential hit. Dirty, Dirty Feeling was a Labor and Stoller song, and we did it in 4 takes. Thrill of Your Love was a gospel-flavored ballad by Stan Kessler, and we finished it in 3 takes. Freddie's pop song, I Gotta Know, was a quick one, done in under 10 minutes. By 4 a.m., we still needed more cuts for the album. We pressed on, pulling songs out of the air. Such a Night echoed the feel of the first 2 songs, and we finished it with a sparkling charm. Then we did Are You Lonesome Tonight, a song the Colonel's wife, Marie, loved. It was a sentimental song, and I gave it the full theatrical treatment. It became an immediate contender for single release. The session was intense, but we finished the album on time. The Colonel's plan was working, and I was ready for the next challenge. Elvis and I had just wrapped up a pretty amazing night in the studio. We were feeling good after cutting some smooth tunes like Girl Next Door Went A-Walking, and a duet with a new friend, Charlie Hodge, on I Will Be Home Again. The highlight was definitely Reconsider Baby, where Boots Randolph's sax solo shone like a star. It was around 7 in the morning, and the whole crew was buzzing with excitement as we finished up. RCA was so jazzed about the album that they rushed it out, telling everyone, "You never heard him like this before." The album, Elvis Is Back, was a game changer. It was like Elvis had found his true voice. The songs were deep, the band was tight, and the sound was crisp. No more of the movie soundtracks or covers. This was pure Elvis. He had a new depth, and the music was a mix of everything he loved, from blues to pop, without sticking to one genre. It was like he had created his own special sound, but there was no time to rest. Just a few weeks later, Elvis and I were back in the studio, this time for his first movie after the Army, GI Blues. The Colonel, Elvis's manager, had a strict set of rules to keep Elvis's image clean and profitable. He made sure that any songs Elvis sang in the movies were owned by his publishing companies, or the writers had to share their royalties. The Colonel also controlled which songs could be released as singles. The movie had some great songs, but there were also some issues. When the Colonel asked Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, who had written hits for Elvis before, to help with the sessions, things got tense. Leiber and Stoller had tried to pitch a different movie idea to Elvis, and the Colonel saw this as a betrayal. He kicked them out, and their songs didn't make it into the movie. It was a big loss, but the Colonel was determined to keep control. The first session for GI Blues was at RCA Studio in Hollywood. We started early, but Elvis was late. The studio setup was different from what we were used to, and it made Elvis uncomfortable. The first song we worked on was Shopping Around, but it sounded flat. The next songs like Did You Ever and Doin' the Best I Can were better, but still not up to the standards we set in March. The title song, GI Blues, was pieced together from different takes, and some of the other songs, like Tonight Is So Right for Love, just didn't click. The second day was even harder. We tried to get a good version of Blue Suede Shoes and Wooden Heart, but it was tough. Pocket Full of Rainbows was especially challenging, and we spent a lot of time on it, but it still didn't feel right. After all that, we still needed to fix some issues. A copyright problem with Tonight Is So Right for Love led to another session a week later. Elvis insisted we go back to radio recorders, where we felt more comfortable. This time we got better versions of Big Boots, Shopping Around, and Pocketful of Rainbows. Even though we finished the sessions, no one was really satisfied. The movie had its moments, but the music wasn't as strong as we hoped. Still, it was part of Elvis's comeback, and we were all learning as we went. The Colonel's rules and the studio challenges were just part of the journey. We knew we had to keep pushing to make Elvis's music the best it could be. I was back in the studio, and things were moving fast. We were at radio recorders in Hollywood, and the place felt different. I was more relaxed, and I felt more in control. Thorne Nogger, the engineer, knew how to get the best out of me. We started with a faster version of Big Boots, and then we did a new take on Shopping Around. Both songs were way better than anything we'd done before. Thorne added a bit of echo, and suddenly my voice sounded alive. We were working on songs for the movie GI Blues, but the union guy made us take a long break after 6 hours. I was frustrated because I was in the zone, but I had to wait. After the break, we tackled Tonight's All Right for Love. There was a mix-up with the song's copyright in Europe, so we had to change the melody and the lyrics a bit. We called it Tonight's All Right for Love, and used a different tune from a Strauss melody that was public domain. We had some issues with the takes after the break. I was a bit tired, and I snapped at Freddie a few times. I wanted everything to be perfect. We finally got a good take, but I was still bothered by the tempo and big boots. We went back and fixed it. By the time we were done, I was exhausted, but we had everything we needed for the movie soundtrack. The Colonel and I talked about whether to release a soundtrack album. Meanwhile, Stuck on You had been a hit, but it didn't sell as much as we hoped. RCA was a bit nervous, but It's Now or Never was coming up, and I was excited about it. There was a problem with the sound quality of It's Now or Never. RCA had made some changes to the mix, and it didn't sound like what I approved in the studio. I complained to the Colonel, and he made them recut it. When it finally came out, it was a huge hit. It stayed at number 1 for 10 weeks and sold a lot more than the last record. I was back on top, but the publishing issues didn't stop. The melody of It's Now or Never was still under copyright in Europe, so RCA had to release The Girl of My Best Friend instead. Despite that, the Colonel was working on getting It's Now or Never released internationally. I was busy with more movie work. 2 months after GI Blues, I started working on a new film for 20th Century Fox. It was called Flaming Star, and I recorded the soundtrack. The songs were more serious, and I didn't really care about singing over pre-recorded tracks for some of them. We recorded Britches, Summer Kisses, Winter Tears, and the title song. The studio changed the movie's name from Black Star to Flaming Star, and they asked me to re-record the title song. The Colonel tried to avoid it, but Fox paid us to do it. In the middle of all this, the Colonel and I were planning a gospel album. I loved singing gospel, and it was a great way to show a different side of me. The Colonel arranged for a photographer to take pictures of me during a break in filming Flaming Star. We picked out a bunch of songs, and I added some of my favorites. We were ready to record, but filming ran over, and we had to push back the date. Finally, on October 30th, we went to RCA Studio B in Nashville. I was excited but also a bit nervous. I arrived with a bandaged hand from a touch football game, but I was ready to go. We started with Milky White Way and His Hand in Mine. I felt the studio atmosphere was perfect, and we got through the songs smoothly. We kept going, recording I Believe in the Man in the Sky, He Knows Just What I Need, and Mansion Over the Hilltop. We took a short break and then continued with In My Father's House, Joshua Fit the Battle, and Swing Down Sweet Chariot. The night was long, but the music kept me going. We finished with If We Never Meet Again, Known Only to Him, and Crying in the Chapel. We even managed to squeeze in Working on the Building before the session ended. It was a long night, but it was worth it. I was proud of the songs we recorded, and I couldn't wait for everyone to hear them. The gospel album was going to be something special. I opened the session with a song called Milky White Way. It's a black gospel song, and I was inspired by a version from 1947 by the Trumpeteers. The song had a deep, bluesy feel, and Boots Randolph played a really cool sax part. The whole quartet, along with some soprano voices, blended together perfectly. It was funky and soulful, and it really showed how much I loved gospel music. Gospel music was a big part of my life growing up. My dad, Vernon, and my mom, Gladys, loved the Blackwood Brothers, and I wanted to pay tribute to the groups that influenced me. I picked a song called His Hand in Mine, which was written by Mosey Lister, who also wrote arrangements for the Statesmen. I sang it with my friend Charlie Hodge, and we had the Jordanaires and Millie Kirkham join in. We only needed 5 takes to get it right, and it turned out really well. Next, I chose a couple of songs by the Statesmen, a group that my parents loved. One was I Believe in the Man in the Sky. I had always admired the lead singer, Jake Hess, and I wanted to do a version that honored their original. We tried to keep the band's backing simple and beautiful. It was a big hit with everyone in the studio. We had a list of songs to record, but I kept changing things up as we went along. I dropped one song and replaced it with another called He Knows Just What I Need. It was a bit too fast and Charlie Hodge's voice got tired, so we had to switch him out for Millie Kirkham, but it still came out great. We also had to record a pop song for RCA, because they needed something for the radio. I suggested turning an old Italian song, Torna a Sorrento, into something new, just like we did with O Sole Mio for It's Now or Never. Doc Pomus and Mort Schumann wrote the lyrics, and we called it It's Now or Never. It was a tough song to sing, but I practiced a lot, and Ray Walker from the Jordanaires even showed me a breathing exercise to help me hit the high notes. We finally got it right, and it sounded amazing. Then we moved on to some more gospel songs. Mansion Over the Hilltop and In My Father's House were both by the Blackwood Brothers, the group that influenced me so much. We also did a couple of songs by the Golden Gate Quartet, a black gospel group that I really admired. I even sang with them in Paris once. Their songs, Swing Down Sweet Chariot and Joshua Fit the Battle, had a really upbeat and infectious feel. The Jordanaires were a big part of the session too. We did a song called I'm Gonna Walk Dem Golden Stairs, which was written by Cully Holt, a former member of the Jordanaires. We nailed it in one take. Another song, If We Never Meet Again, was also a one-take wonder. We were on a roll. As the night went on, we did a song called Crying in the Chapel. It was a big hit in the past, and we tried really hard to get it right, but we didn't finish it until much later. We were short one more gospel song, so Gordon Stoker from the Jordanaires suggested Working on the Building. It had a great swing to it, and we all had a lot of fun with it. By the time the sun came up, we had recorded 13 songs, all of which were really special to me. I was so proud of how they turned out. The album cover had a picture of me looking confident and happy. The single Are You Lonesome Tonight was released in October, and it went to #1 in just 3 weeks. It was a huge success, and it felt great to be back on top. After the gospel sessions, I went straight to Los Angeles to record the soundtrack for my movie, Wild in the Country. The songs were more understated and suited for the movie. We recorded a few ballads, and Lonely Man was chosen as the B-side for a single. We also did a song called I Slipped, I Stumbled, I Fell, which was better suited for the movie than the radio. During the making of Wild in the Country, I met a young woman named Nancy Sharp. She worked for 20th Century Fox, and we became good friends. We had fun making music together at my house, and there's even a tape of us singing some old songs. By the end of the year, I had made 3 movies and recorded 51 songs. I had 3 #1 singles, and my album Elvis Is Back had reached #2 on the charts. My comeback was going better than I could have ever imagined. Sales of It's Now or Never were through the roof, especially in Europe. It was a truly remarkable year, and I was excited to see what the future held. The Colonel and I had a deal. We were going to release a couple of songs from Flaming Star, Summer Kisses, Winter Tears, and the title track, along with It's Now or Never, and Are You Lonesome Tonight, on an EP in February or March. The Colonel was trying to figure out what was working and what wasn't. The GI Blues soundtrack had sold over 700,000 copies, but Elvis Is Back only sold 200,000. The Christmas album, His Hand in Mine, didn't do as well as we hoped, but everyone thought it would be a long-term seller. The Colonel decided more promotion was the answer. He set up 2 benefit shows, one in Memphis and one in Hawaii, to get more attention. I was also heading back to Nashville to record some new songs. On March 12, 1961, I went to RCA Studio B in Nashville to record with the same band from the last session. Steve Scholes was the producer, and Bill Porter was the engineer. The band included Scotty Moore, Floyd Kramer, Hank Garland, Boots Randolph, Bob Moore, and DJ Fontana, with the Jordanaires and Millie Kirkham on vocals. We started with a song called I'm Comin' Home, written by Charlie Rich. I listened to a version by Carl Mann and tried to nail it down. Steve Scholes suggested we get the tempo right, and I needed a couple of lines to get started. We got the hang of it, and the band and I fell into a comfortable groove. Next we did Gently, which had a folk-like feel. Hank Garland's guitar work was amazing. In Your Arms was quick, and Boots Randolph barely had time to think of a solo. Give Me the Right had a bluesy vibe, and we toned it down a bit after the first take. On I Feel So Bad, I walked over to cheer Boots on during his solo, and the saxophone suddenly shifted from one channel to another. We didn't notice until it was too late, but it ended up being a cool effect. It's a Sin was a heart ballad I remembered from when I saw Eddie Arnold perform it at Ellis Auditorium. We worked on the harmonies and sped up the arrangement. I Want You With Me was a Woody Harris rocker, and I echoed Bobby Darin's vocal style. Don Robertson's There's Always Me was a song I really connected with. I told the band, this is my song, and we nailed it. Starting Today was another ballad, and we followed it with Sentimental Me, a cover of an old Ames Brothers hit. Judy was a standout. I played acoustic guitar and led the band through Teddy Riedell's 1960 recording. Floyd Kramer's piano added a touch of magic. We wrapped up with Put the Blame on Me, a bluesy tune that fit perfectly. RCA Bill Bullock wrote me a nice note after the session, saying how great the album turned out, but there was a bit of a hiccup with RCA. They backed out of a deal to build a recording studio at Graceland. The Colonel worked out a compromise where I got some new RCA stereo equipment, and Studio B in Nashville remained my home base. Most of the band went to California for the Hawaii charity concert, and we also had some new faces for the Blue Hawaii soundtrack. We recorded at Radio Recorders in Hollywood from March 21st to 23. The producer was Joseph Lilly, and Thorne Nogger was the engineer. We had Scotty Moore, Boots Randolph, Hank Garland, Tiny Timbrel, Bob Moore, DJ Fontana, and the Jordanaires, plus Hal Blaine on drums, Alvino Ray on steel guitar, Fred Tevers and Bernie Lewis on ukulele, and George Fields on harmonica. We started with Hawaiian Sunset and Aloha-O, classic Hawaiian songs. Kuyu Aipo and No More Blue Hawaii were also on the list. Slisson Sand was a fun, silly song that got everyone laughing. Blue Hawaii and Ito Eats were more serious, and Hawaiian Wedding Song was a beautiful ballad. Island of Love and Almost Always True rounded out the first day. The next day we did Moonlight Swim and more. Can't Help Falling in Love was a ballad I really connected with. We did 29 takes, and I knew we had something special. Beach Boy Blues and Rock a Hula Baby were fun, upbeat songs to end the session. On the third take of Rock a Hula Baby, everyone went wild. It was like we were kids about to go on summer vacation. We chose the fifth take as the master, and we were all ready for the Hawaii benefit show. The show at Block Arena in Pearl Harbor was my last live performance for 8 years. The band and I played with all the energy we had, and it was a great way to end a busy and productive time. The night was late, and the studio was buzzing with the energy of a band about to make magic. I was in RCA Studio B in Nashville, and we were all ready to rock. The band was tight, and I was feeling good. Steve Scholes was there to produce, and Bill Porter was handling the engineering. Scotty Moore was on guitar, and Floyd Kramer was on the keys. Boots Randolph was there with his sax, and Bob Moore was keeping the groove with his bass. DJ Fontana was on drums, and the Jordanaires were ready to harmonize. We started with Kiss Me Quick. It was a fun, upbeat song with a European feel. Scotty played the guitar like it was a mandolin, and we all had to work on the rhythm. I loved the song, and we kept at it until we got it just right. After a few takes, we nailed it, and it felt great. Next, we tackled That's Someone You Never Forget. This was a special song. Red West wrote it, and I had a hand in the title. We started with an acoustic guitar and kept it simple. The Jordanaires and Floyd Kramer's piano added the right touch. I wanted to make sure we did the song justice, so we took our time. When we finished, it felt like a little piece of art. Then we moved on to I'm Yours. It was a beautiful ballad, and I felt like it was meant for a wedding. Floyd played the organ, and I tried out a spoken interlude. We built the song in parts, and it came together perfectly. It was a song that felt like it could stand the test of time. The real party started with His Latest Flame. It was a song that just made you want to dance. We started with a Bo Diddley beat, and I sang it like I meant it. The band kept adding layers, and it grew into a full-on pop masterpiece. Mort Schumann, who wrote the song, was thrilled with how it turned out. The intro was a little different, but it worked. It was fresh and exciting. Finally, we did Little Sister. It was a tough, funky song, and Hank Garland borrowed a guitar to get the right sound. We slowed it down and it felt perfect. Floyd's organ added that extra touch, and we all knew we had something special. We kept playing it over and over, even after we had the master. It was just that good. The next day, we went back to the studio to record songs for the movie, Follow That Dream. The songs were okay, but not as strong as what we had just recorded. I picked and chose which ones to include on the soundtrack, and we made the best of it. The Colonel was always watching, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. He wanted hits, and he knew the value of a good single. The songs we recorded that night in June were some of the best we had done in a while. They showed that when we focused, we could create something magical. The music industry was changing, and Elvis Presley was at the center of it all. We were making history one song at a time. And even though the world was changing, the love for music never did. We kept making music, and people kept listening. That's what it was all about.